this faster warming in the Arctic is one of those factors that affects European weather and tends to favor persistent weather patterns.
Only 4 years, the amount of Antarctic sea ice that was lost was equivalent to all the Arctic sea ice that's been lost over decades.
The science gives us the evidence to go and talk to people and say, this is serious, we need to change how we live our lives.
We see declines of species, of biodiversity, and consequences for food security, human engagement with Antarctica, and ultimately the health of the entire region and the wider planet.
The activities that we undertake in Antarctica are recognise that no one country can do it on its own.
Oceanele reglează clima planetei. Ce se întâmplă astăzi, la mii de kilometri de aici, din fiordurile Norvegiei și până în Antarctica, influențează nivelul mărilor, circulația curenților oceanici, ecosistemele și chiar vremea pe care o trăim. În acest episod aflăm ce au descoperit oamenii de știință și de ce Antarctica este unul dintre cele mai importante locuri pentru a înțelege fenomenele, schimbările climatice cu care se confruntă planeta noastră.
În 2026, vremea extremă a deschis jurnalele de știri din toată lumea. Poate nu ne dăm seama cât de mult a afectat orașe, agricultura, râuri importante, transportul, facturile și chiar și felul în care ne planificăm viața. Dar pentru a înțelege de ce aceste fenomene devin mai intense sau mai persistente, cercetătorii nu privesc doar spre atmosferă, privesc spre întregul sistem al planetei, oceane, gheață, curenți, nori, viață marină. Cu această întrebare am ajuns și noi la Oslo, la SCAR 2026, cea mai importantă întâlnire mondială a cercetătorilor care studiază Antarctica. Am vrut să aflăm ce ne poate spune continentul înghețat despre lumea în care trăim și cum vom trăi în anii ce vin.
This persistence of weather has indeed become a very important research question. So when we speak about extremes, of course, individual daily values are important, but if we think about the consequences of extreme events, then it is particularly important how long they last, because long-lasting extremes amplify the impacts. If there is one very warm day, it does not have a major impact, but if we have a full month of consecutive warm and dry weather, then it has strong impacts, and of course also in the case of consecutive wet weather.
Așa apar blocajele atmosferice. Sunt zone mari de presiune ridicată care rămân pe loc și împing ploile departe, după cum explică Timo Vihma.
Periods of long-lasting warm and dry summer weather are typically related to high-pressure blockings, so that an area of high atmospheric pressure covers a large area and stays stationary over that area, and then it guides the cyclone tracks to go around this high pressure blocking. There are signs of this increase in persistence, and one factor that may affect is the fact that the Arctic is warming much faster than mid-latitudes, and it results to weaker temperature difference between the Arctic and mid-latitudes, and this means weaker westerly winds. We cannot say that European weather is controlled by what happens in the Arctic, but this faster warming in the Arctic is one of those factors that affects European weather and tends to favor persistent weather patterns.
Antarctica doar pare foarte departe de aceste probleme. Oamenii de știință sunt însă de altă părere.
It is one of the things that controls sea level because of the amount of ice in Antarctica. So as ice melts, you get sea level rise, and that happens around every coastline in the world. But then as the temperatures change in the Antarctic and you change ocean circulation, for example, you change the distribution of heat around the planet. And then as you affect, for example, some of the species in Antarctica, then that's the base of the food web for the planet. So it's really vital.
Iar albul Antarcticii contează enorm, mai ales când vorbim despre liniile de coastă.
It reflects sunlight. If we change the amount of white, so if we have less sea ice, we change the reflectivity of the planet. If we melt the ice sheets, we get more sea level rise, and so we change the coastlines of the planet. So whilst Antarctica is a long way away from most people, it's present in how the planet works in our everyday lives. So it's part of all of us. Very much at the moment, it's around understanding the future of the planet with the changing Antarctica, and my interest really is around a warming ocean. So over 90% of the heat captured by the planet sits in the oceans, right? So it's an ocean story, and the science gives us the evidence to go and talk to people and say, this is serious. We need to change how we live our lives and how we, not so much how we live our lives, but the emissions that come with how we live our lives.
Una dintre cele mai interesante comparații a venit de la Sian Henley, cercetătoare în științe marine la University of Edinburgh. Ea ne-a explicat rolul oceanului austral pornind de la combustibilul pe care îl consumăm.
If you consider 10 litres of petrol that you put in your car in Norway or the UK or the US, of those 10 litres and the carbon emissions that come from those 10 litres, about 1 litre ends up in the Southern Ocean, because the Southern Ocean absorbs about 10% of the total human emissions of carbon dioxide. So effectively, it safeguards us from climate change being much worse than it already is.
Dar întreg ecosistemul este afectat de pierderea gheții marine.
Sea ice has always been a feature that grows in the winter and retreats in the summer, and that gives life to the Antarctic system. But it also provides nutrients, it influences the environment to be favourable for all of these plants, animals, bacteria, etc. So as the sea ice is being lost, which we've seen rapid declines over the last 10 years, the fundamental way that the ecosystem functions is changing. And one particular example that I'll give, because it's quite easy to understand, is that sea ice sets the timing at which biological processes happen. So when the sea ice retreats, there's a bloom of plant-like material. The animals come to the Southern Ocean at that time to feed on that enormous feast, that big meal. Other animals that live in Antarctica year-round time their processes like reproduction, growth, etc. around that big source of food being available at a particular time of year. But as the sea ice retreats, as we lose sea ice, that bloom that provides all that food happens earlier. So there's then a mismatch between when the food is available and when the animals arrive to take advantage of that meal. So essentially we're getting a situation where all of these animals are arriving late for their meal when there is not as much food left for them, and therefore they can't eat as much as they need to eat. This affects their health, their reproduction, and ultimately their survival.
De altfel, sunt și exemple. Pinguinul imperial și foca antarctică cu blană au fost trecute anul acesta de către Uniunea Internațională pentru Conservarea Naturii pe lista roșie la categoria specii în pericol. Estimările arată că populația de pinguini imperiali s-ar putea înjumătăți până în anii 2080, iar foca antarctică cu blană a pierdut deja peste jumătate din populație față de anul 2000. Iar aceste situații nu sunt doar în zona gheții. În subantarctica, Heard Island, cercetătorii australieni au raportat mortalitate foarte mare la puii de elefant de mare din cauza unui focar de gripă aviară H5N1. ani la rând, schimbările din Antarctica au părut mai puțin relevante decât cele din Arctica. În nord, gheața marină scădea vizibil, în sud, evoluția era mai lentă, iar uneori gheața chiar creștea. Apoi, în ultimul deceniu, ceva s-a schimbat. În iunie 2026, întinderea gheții marine antarctice a fost de 12,7 milioane de kilometri pătrați, cu 1,1 milioane de kilometri pătrați sub media anilor 1991-2020.
It's been such an astonishing drop. In only 4 years, the amount of Antarctic sea ice that was lost was equivalent to all the Arctic sea ice that's been lost over decades. And obviously we're all very aware of what's happening in the Arctic. And so that loss of sea ice is critically important for ocean currents, for the surface energy balance of the Earth. By that I mean that sea ice is light and reflective. And so if we lose that light and reflective cover, more of the sun's energy gets absorbed by the Earth system. And it's also critically important for ecosystems and the whole kind of Southern Ocean ecosystem that in some ways is dependent on that food web. So it has critical importance way beyond the sea ice itself.
Protejarea naturii ține de noi toți, nu are granițe, nu ține cont nici de rasă, nici de culoarea politică, nici de statut și mai ales nici de locul în care trăim. Iar evenimentul SCAR 2026, care a adus la un loc oameni de știință din toate domeniile și din toate colțurile lumii, tocmai asta ne-a demonstrat: colaborare, diversitate, seriozitate, toți cu un singur scop: protejarea planetei mamă.
This happens every 2 years and it brings together the entire global community to pool everything we understand about science so that we can get the most up-to-date information across every nation. So the activities that we undertake in Antarctica are recognize that no one country can, the enormity of the issues in Antarctica and the research we have to do, no one country can do it on its own. So this is a really important event to bring that together.
The Antarctic Science Conference is so valuable, again, particularly for myself, because all Antarctic science disciplines and the humanities and the social sciences are represented here. It really is an unparalleled opportunity to meet people from around the world. It's truly international, from many disciplines, and to make connections that we just could not make otherwise.
Coming to events like this, seeing people, being able to share a coffee with people, go out for dinner, really helps to build the relationships that underpin the science that we do when we go to our home institutions or when we go to Antarctica and the Southern Ocean. And I'd say for young people, for early career researchers, it's important to come to these events to meet people who are influential figures in the field and how to accelerate their career in science.
Poate că cei mai mulți dintre noi nici nu vom ajunge vreodată în Antarctica, dar Antarctica ajunge deja să ne influențeze inclusiv deciziile banale, cum ar fi ce haine purtăm sau dacă pornim sau nu aerul condiționat, prin verile tot mai fierbinți, prin secete care țin tot mai mult, prin nivelurile crescute ale mărilor, prin hrana tot mai scumpă. De noi depinde, pentru copiii noștri, pentru planeta noastră.
If we keep burning lots of fossil fuels, emitting lots of carbon, driving that global warming, we could, in 10 years' time, see that important biological thresholds have been crossed, and therefore the ecosystem changes beyond the point at which it can recover. We see declines of species, of biodiversity, and consequences for food security, human engagement with Antarctica, and ultimately the health of the entire region and the wider planet.